Hi, this is Talia Argandesi, the director of the Center for Writing and Speaking at Ursinus College, and this is part 2 of our video about writing personal statements for grad school. We're going to start out with a little game. I'm going to show you 2 examples of ways to express something in your personal statement, and I'd like you to think about which one you think is better and consider why. The whole purpose of this little exercise is to get you thinking about using your personal statement to show rather than to tell. In other words, the whole rest of your application package is going to be telling your admissions officers what your qualifications are, so listing them. And your personal statement is a place for you to illustrate them and explain them. The primary way you're going to do that is through vivid, specific sensory details from your life. So instead of just saying, I am like this, I'm like that, you're going to give an example or show the details of why or how you're like that. So let's look at some examples. You may want to express in certain kinds of applications that you are a compassionate person. So one way you can say that is something like, I want to become a doctor because I'm interested in science and I want to help people. A better way you can say something like this is, emptying my grandmother's bedpan at 3 in the morning, I stumbled and spilled half its contents onto her beautiful antique rug. That was the moment I realized how much I loved her and what it would take truly to be a competent, compassionate doctor. I think I already said what the answer is, but this is the second one is the better. The first way is generic, and it's an example of telling, where you're just stating that you are like this or want to be like this. And this is showing an illustration of how it shows in how it's demonstrated in your life that you are compassionate. So, okay, along the same lines, you want to express the idea that you're thoughtful for many of these kinds of opportunities. And so, one thing you might say is, I want to pursue a PhD in literature because I'm a thoughtful person and I love to read. You also might say, growing up, while my parents cheered at my siblings' basketball games, I would sneak under the bleachers to read one more chapter of the book I'd started at home. So, which one do you think is better? I'm sure it's clear that this is more, the second one is more showing and less telling. Anyone who is applying for the same program as you thinks this about themselves, that they're going to get a PhD because they're thoughtful and they like reading. The second one is a detail that shows what that actually looks like in your life. And as you can see, it's nothing, dramatic or exciting. It's just detailed and specific to you as a person. For many applications, you're going to want to express something along the lines of, I enjoy challenges. So you might say, I like intellectual challenges, so a PhD in neuroscience seems to be the perfect fit for me. Another way you could say, the 7th time I ran the experiment, I finally got the results my professor had predicted. But it was the 6th time, while considering how deeply flawed my method had been, that I started to consider a PhD in neuroscience. What one do you think is better? You're right, is this second one that has details and that brings the reader to the situation that you're describing. This again is going to be true of everyone who applies, but maybe not everyone who applies went through this experience of having a lot of failed experiments. So showing rather than telling is always better. Okay, what if you want to talk about how you've overcome adversity to get to where you are? You might just say that. I know I can handle law school because I've had to overcome a lot of adversity in my life. Okay, that's fine. You also might say, I think the year my father was in the hospital, when I worked 3 jobs to support my family, gave me the most insight into the rigors I will face in law school, late nights, emotional stress, and the challenges of time management. Obviously, the second one, which is more specific to your experience, is preferred because it shows rather than tells and it gives details. So if you're in a situation where you get to talk specifically about the school you're applying for, you might want to be expressing to the school how important it is to you, not just that you get into whatever grad school or whatever, fellowship program you're applying for, but also that this school is your top priority. So you can say something like, I want to study at Johns Hopkins because of its renowned professors and stellar reputation. That's good because you're telling them nice things about themselves. But you might also say something like, at Johns Hopkins, I look forward to working in Professor Gould's Undulapodia lab. Her recent article in Eukaryotics Review, The Defense Mechanisms of Oceanic Flagella, influenced my thinking on the functioning of cilia and single-cell organisms. Working in the Undulapodia lab at Johns Hopkins would allow me to continue the research I am currently undertaking on Salmonella typhimurium. It's obvious, I don't have to ask you that this one is better, the second one. It shows that you truly understand what is good and what is superior about the school that you're applying to or the program that you're applying to. And then it also links specifics of what you've done in your life so far to the opportunities that you could get at that particular school. And so this is the kind of detail you want to include when you're talking to the school about itself. So let's talk for a second about something that kind of trips people up sometimes, which is the intro and the conclusion of the personal statement. What are you actually supposed to do in these things? So let me talk first about the introduction. It's a very important paragraph in any piece of writing. It's maybe the most important paragraph. And you want to use your personal statement introduction, first of all, to catch your reader's attention. So that means including some kind of hook, something that would reel them in, imagining that they don't necessarily have to read this personal statement. You want to do something in that first paragraph that intrigues them. And then you also want to establish the tone of your essay. Even though you're trying to stand out, you do want to stay true to the sort of level of formality that would be expected in a personal statement. So what I'm trying to get at here is don't give a bland introduction. Don't wait to give your details until later in the essay. It's a short essay, so you want to do something eye-catching right at the beginning. I think a good exercise for you to do, I already mentioned, is to imagine that the reader will only read your introduction. What is it that is the most important thing that you want them to take away from your application? So you can think of the introduction of your personal statement as like your elevator pitch. You could only talk to someone for 2 or 3 sentences. What would you say? And then the conclusion, there's a couple important things to do here. You can give a quick summary of why you and the school are a good match, but mostly your purpose of your conclusion is just to give a sense of closure. It's just to end the essay so that it doesn't just drop off at the end abruptly. If you did something here in the introduction to catch the reader's attention in the first paragraph, it's often a good idea to return to that concept in the final paragraph, and that gives the sort of like complete circle feeling that that gives that sense of closure. So if you talk here about you want it to be a nurse, you always used to fix your doll's broken legs or whatever. You want to maybe go back and talk about like the dolls in the conclusion. If you know what I'm saying. That's called like a full circle conclusion. You don't have to do that, but if you're reading through and it feels like the right thing to do, it's a good way to conclude. So one thing you might want to do now, if you already have a draft of your personal statement, look just at your intro and conclusion. Reread that first and last paragraph. Even if you think the intro is already good, just pause the video and spend about 5 minutes to just like free write an alternative. Like you try to do something a little more risky or exciting in that first paragraph to catch the reader's attention, or try to have an interesting hook. So pause the video now if you want to do that. All right, I'm assuming you're coming back from your pause, and we're going to talk about a couple of things to avoid doing. Now, don't stress out too much, but I'm going to tell you a couple of things that sort of are like common pitfalls that people might be tempted to do, and I'll let you know that they're not preferred in personal statements. So something people are often tempted to do is just like relist all their achievements, but you're somewhere else on the application, you're going to be able to list, all the awards you've gotten and all the high GPA you have and things like that. So you don't really need to do that in your personal statement, but you want to pick one, two, or three really important achievements and kind of flesh them out. That's where you put all the details and you sort of bring your reader to that experience so that they can see it and understand it better. Sometimes people can tend to get a little repetitive in their personal statements, going on and on about how like they have this great desire to be a veterinarian or whatever. It's not the wrong instinct. It's just that it's a show rather than tell thing. You have to make sure that you're showing specific evidence of this claim that you're making that you've always wanted to do it. So the personal statement is the place for you to detail the examples from your life where it really demonstrates your desires to go into that field. You may really be into the field that you're going into, and you might be tempted to sort of like wax poetic about how important that field is. But the people who are reading this are already in that field and they sort of know it. But this is another similar one about showing versus telling. If you can be specific about what it is about the field that you uniquely care about, that's a better approach in the personal statement. Talked about this in video 1 briefly, but it's okay to bring up some negative thing in your personal statement, like if you had difficulty in your history, or if you had a bad aspect of your transcript, like you can talk about that, but just don't dwell in it for too long. In general, just keep it upbeat. When you talk about something negative, you're emphasizing the positives that came out of it, and any negative parts that you talk about, just keep it relatively short. Talked about this in the first video too, but just pay attention to the length. Try to get close to the word limit, but definitely don't go over. And then be careful about your sentence level polish, because even though for many of you, you won't be necessarily applying to something that requires good writing, that attention to detail is something that they sort of look for. And so you want to proofread your sentences really carefully. And if you feel like that's not a strength of yours, to also have someone else proofread it, maybe several people proofread it. And the very last thing is just tell the truth in your personal statement. Sincerity goes a long way and it is visible. You can tell when someone's faking it in their personal statement. So just be true and you'll be okay. Couple things you should do to get extra support other than watch this video. You should read some examples of personal statements to get a sense of the style and the genre. This book, Graduate Admission Essays by Donald Asher, is good because it's mostly examples, so it has examples of every different kind of grad school. So it's really helpful to read through those. You also might get in touch with people, professors, and staff members at your grad school. For example, at Ursinus, we have the Career and Postgraduate Development Office, and also individuals within each department who specialize in helping students get into grad school or med school. Get in touch with them and see if you can read some alumni's successful personal statements, and that is going to help you sort of understand the tone better. And then very important to get people to read your statement. You should go through many drafts of this and you should get a good amount of feedback on this. Definitely ask professors who you know, who are in the field that you are in or near the field that you are trying to get into, and ask them to read your personal statement and give you some feedback. Ask friends that you think are good writers. And then, of course, almost every college has some kind of writing center. At Ursinus, the Center for Writing and Speaking offers free consultations by very, very clever students, and they'll work with you for up to an hour on your personal statement. And that is the website where you can make an appointment. And if Ursinus is remote, you can get online appointments too. So that is it. My name is Talia Argandesi. If you have questions, you can email me at talia@targandesi@ursinus.edu, and I can probably direct you to someone who will be helpful to you. Thank you so much for your time.